United States Senator Roy Blunt is in the studio with me. He was in the studio with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press yesterday talking about a potential travel ban because of Ebola.
We don't have flights directly in and out of any of these countries, so all of our people go through some other country to get there anyway. The question is, do you let people come here from this area that is clearly stressed? And one way to prevent that is just not to issue them a visa. Everybody that would travel here from those countries, no matter where they get to first, before they get off the plane here, they have to have a visa that allows them to stay here. I'd suspend those visas until we have this under better control and have a sense that the carriers they are using are monitoring this in a better way than they have been up till now.
Senator Blunt joins me in studio this afternoon after being on national television yesterday. Good afternoon, Senator. How are you?
Good to be with you.
So is that realistic? Is that something that has been introduced? I know you're supporting this. It would have to pass Congress.
Well, I think the president could do that on his own if he wanted to. It's like a lot of other things. The things the president can do, he seems to never want to do, and the things that he can't do, he seems eager to do, like change the immigration laws.
Let's also face it, he does most things on his own without your help anyway. So.
Well, I think I think you could do this. The State Department could do this in this situation. If not, we'll be back to Washington here in a few days, and I'd be willing to do that right now. But I think it's very unlikely that Harry Reid will call the Senate back in the middle of all these tight Senate elections around the country. And, we can't determine whether these flights go in and out of that country because they don't come from here. We can determine whether people can come to the United States now. And I think we should decide that they can't. We should just make a decision until we get this under better control. We need to suspend the visas that have been issued, not issue anymore, and then look for the way we can create exceptions as this gets more and more. We have more confidence that individual countries like Senegal is now off the list. Now, there's not much you'd want to copy that Senegal does, but they have managed to move themselves off the list of countries that have an Ebola problem.
So the practical application of this would be, if you're coming from one of these West African nations that has, what would be included in that? Liberia, obviously. How many other countries would be included
Sierra
in that?
Leone, Liberia. Yeah. I think there's parts of a couple of other countries that are beginning to get this under more control. Those would be the two principal countries.
So in order to travel here, they have to have the visa to come to this country.
Right.
If they are natives of those countries, they could not come to this country. Is there a way, though, to control someone who was a British citizen or another citizen who had left those countries and then still tried to get into the U.S.?
Well, or how do you deal with people from the United States that are in those countries? And I think that's a different it's a different protocol. It's looking for how you create exceptions, or you're not going to let anybody travel who has even been to one of those countries. But the easiest group to control initially is to say no travel by people who have to have a visa from those countries to travel to the United States, and then look for the ways you could deal with a much smaller population of U.S. health care workers that might have been there. Clearly, there should be a way that those healthcare workers can come back pretty easily, as long as you're confident that they can come back as part of the normal population when they get back.
Has there been too much hysteria on this here in this country? And one of the graphics that was thrown up on Meet the Press yesterday, I think it was after your segment, was the U.S. deaths. Actually, I think maybe immediately before or after. U.S. deaths in 2011, the latest that the numbers are available. Flu and pneumonia, 53,826. Motor vehicle accidents, 35,000. Accidental falls, 27,000. Tuberculosis, 539. Lightning strikes, 26. And right now, 1 Ebola death in this country. That's not to say it's not a serious situation. In fact, I'm going to play some audio a little bit later after you leave the studio here this afternoon by one of the other panelists that was on Meet the Press yesterday, who I think made some really good points, Lori Garrett from the Council on Foreign Relations, that the real crisis, and this may go to your point about the travel ban, is happening in West Africa, not in this country. So it is a serious health concern. It's a scary disease, but I don't know that we are doing the country any favor by not putting things into proper perspective.
Well, that's a good point. I'm trying to decide exactly how to respond to that. Containment is the way to deal with this, and so the first place you do is you contain it where it's coming from. You're sure that you do everything you can to contain it here in the most isolated way possible in the circumstances that need to be dealt with here, like the two missionaries that came back, went to Emory University Hospital. They stayed there however long they stayed. They were dismissed and they were over it. Not a single American was concerned about that. When the healthcare system was working the way it was supposed to work, nobody cared about that. And in terms of all of those other things, half the people that get the flu don't die from the flu. Obviously a lot of people die from the flu.
This is a more deadly
disease. Half of the people that get this, everything I've read suggests don't survive it.
Sure.
So clearly it is a greater concern. People die from lots of things and in pretty good numbers, but none of that list you went down, even lightning strikes, do half of the people that get lightning struck don't die of the lightning strike. I may be wrong on that, but I'm sure half the people that get the flu don't die with the flu.
No, and that's a good point. Look, I'm not trying to minimize the consequences of this, because what you don't want to do is ignore it and say, oh, it's not that big of a deal, and then have it become a bigger deal. Do you think, though, that, and this is where I think a lot of the panic and the fear is coming from in this country, there's no confidence in the CDC. There's no confidence in people in Washington, certainly in the president, to make sure that this is contained properly.
Well, I think that's right. And I think the other thing I'd say there is if this was an isolated incident where it was the only problem, I think people say, oh, well, that's just, one thing didn't work quite the way it was supposed to work. But whether it's the kids at the border or the records at the IRS or the Secret Service not protecting the president or what's happening with ISIS, and it's just like nobody's minding the store. And, I think the administration's casualness about everything makes it seem questionable when they say this is not an epidemic. People really don't need to be concerned about that. If there was more confidence that somebody was managing the government in a better way. That's why, whether you like it or not, this does play into the politics of what's happening right now. Two big issues that people are concerned about is who can better manage the government and who can better defend and secure the country. And right up there, those are right up with the top three would include who can better manage the economy. But this one goes right to security concerns and who's running the store, who can manage the government better. And frankly, the president is not nearly where he was just a couple of years ago on either of those questions.
Senator Roy Blunt is with me in the studio this afternoon, following up his appearance during Meet the Press yesterday in what was called an Ebola summit. On Friday, the president appoints this guy, Ron Klain, as the Ebola czar. Two-part question here. Do we need an Ebola czar, and your opinion of that appointment?
Probably needed somebody in charge. I think if the president would have probably been equally as well served to take one of the people in the middle of this right now and say, okay, everything is Dr. Fauci at NIH, or everything is the person, they're going to be reporting directly to me. I think he made two mistakes with the person he appointed. One was this person's record is one as sort of a political fixer. And so it's just like this is a PR I think people are tired of everything being a PR problem.
He lost a lot of people on the left on this one. I saw lots of tweets, lots of reaction from the weekend where people on his side are even scratching their heads over this appointment.
And then you layer him in instead of putting him right where he reports to you. This person now apparently reports to both Monaco, the domestic or the Homeland Security person, I think that's her name, and Susan Rice. So, it's also kind of violates a management principle. You never lay in, if you're trying to get somebody in charge, you never layer in another person in the chain of command. You put them on top of the chain of command for this issue. And so he didn't do that. But I think the bigger concern is it's like so many other things. Well, it's just really a PR problem. It's not the kind of problem people think it is, but it's just something we need to be sure we handle the PR, and I think there's a level of seriousness that people would like to see here that they don't quite see with this person asked to do this job.
Do you have time to hang for another segment, or are you off and running?
How long is another segment? I can stay another 10 minutes.
I could keep if I keep you till about 3:40.
Yep.
Is that all right? Because we were trying to get you in early and we ran a little bit late, so hang on. I don't want to cut you short because I have some other things to talk about. Senator Roy Blunt with me this afternoon. Senator Roy Blunt is with me in studio. One topic off of politics and a little bit more lighthearted. Are you going to get to Kansas City for a World Series game?
I'm trying. I'm hoping that I can get there for a game and looking at the calendar, seeing if I can't make it work. The Royals have had a great year. They've had unbelievable postseason, and
pretty cool.
We'll see what happens.
I'm
anxious to see what happens tomorrow night.
Yeah, we obviously wish that games.
I have no love for the Giants right now either.
No, none of us do.
As a Missouri baseball fan, this is easy, you know.
That would have been a fun rematch from 1985. It still stings those of us who are Cardinals fans, but I think we can root for the Royals, certainly. There was a piece that I read this week I wanted to get your opinion on, and I always ask you for a gut check on this. It looks like, if you believe the odds makers and the experts, that the chance for you to be in the majority in the United States Senate, by the way, do you get a better office with that?
I couldn't have. I've got Harry Truman's old office in the Russell Building. I couldn't have a better office. So.
Sometimes, though, people who are in the majority that don't have as much seniority get.
You don't. Actually, the office space is pretty much done by seniority. But,
so it doesn't matter who the majority is.
A lot of other things are done by who's in the majority and who decides what bill to bring up and who decides what hearing to have and who decides whether we're going to get back on the floor of the Senate to the way the Senate always ran until the last 7 or 8 years.
So gut check on you being in the majority before I bring up some important questions here. You think that's likely?
If my side seems to have plenty of capacity to mess up a sure thing at the last minute. And so I wouldn't say it's impossible that we don't do something that creates a change and a reversal of fortunes here. But if you read everything of the people who sort of do this for a living, they're all now in the 60 to 70% chance that Republicans take the majority. And I've always thought if it was a day that produced a majority of 51, probably a day that gets to 52 or 53. You know, these kind of election years, usually once things begin to break, they all pretty much break the same way.
Wall Street Journal piece over the weekend, James Freeman wrote this, and the question was, what if Republicans win? We'll never have the moral authority to deal with social welfare if we can't deal with corporate welfare. And his point is that there's an opportunity in the next couple of years, and he mentioned that it's not good enough to simply fight what the president is going to do, but you have to seize the moment and try to achieve something significant. And he focuses in this piece on tax reform.
And there's a way to do tax reform. And even if many things in the Senate take 60 votes, but remember the Bush tax cuts in 2001 and 2003, 99% of the people that benefited from those tax cuts, that became permanent tax policy then under President Obama a couple of years ago. But we could, by passing a budget with the tools in it to do a 10-year tax rewrite, we could rewrite the tax code, corporate and otherwise, and, of course, a flatter, much fairer system where you don't pick winners or losers is what that article suggested and what I'd like to see. I wasn't for everything in that article. I do think the XM Bank has some real assistance as we try to compete with people who are subsidized by their own governments around the world, and that's an institution that actually makes money for taxpayers.
That's the Export-Import Bank?
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's a debate, but I think generally the principle there is one that we could achieve. I'm hoping if there is first of all, we have to pass a budget, something the Democrats have failed to do except from one time in the last 7 years, I believe. And when we pass a budget, that gives you the opportunity to put the tools in it where with 51 senators and a majority in the House, you could at least put a bill on the president's desk that said, let's make this tax system flatter, fairer, simpler. Let's quit picking winners or losers in the tax code.
James Freeman talks about Jeb Henseling, who is a Texas Republican, former colleague. I'm sure you know him very well. He is the chair of the House Financial Services Committee, could be the Speaker of the House sometime. And he said if Republicans do win a majority, count Mr. Henseling among those who think they'll have to do more than stymie Mr. Obama for his final 2 years. They'll have to produce legislation, he says, putting bills on the president's desk that he will have to sign or veto. So one of the suggestions is, you already talked about the Export-Import Bank. What about Dodd-Frank? Can you repeal Dodd-Frank? Do you think we should?
Well, I think all you got to do is talk to small-town bankers who think they're being crippled by what was put in there for something that, frankly, big banks were, why it was in there, but they have the resources to comply with it. The Ways and Means Committee, the Finance Committee in the Senate, can do that. But there's over 350 bills the House has passed, stacked up on Harry Reid's desk right now. My belief is 250 of those would get 60 votes on the Senate floor today. So you could create a lot of activity by just looking at things that there's already agreement on. But since it was possible to have an amendment that Senator Reid might not have wanted his side to vote on, then you don't bring anything to the floor. Even the simplest things don't come to the floor. That combined with doing the debate about how we spend our money in public and open like it was done for a couple hundred years, take a lot of time in a positive way, create a sense that the government is working again in an open way, and the budget becomes the vehicle that you can do even bigger things that don't maybe get 60 votes, but have obviously a majority in both the House and Senate. And I'm looking forward to that happening if we get a chance to make it happen.
Senator Blunt, good to see you in person. I'm glad you made time for the little guy here in St. Louis after the national TV appearance with Meet the Press yesterday.
Well,
you looked fine, though, on that show. You looked great.
I'm glad you thought so, but I've always got time for you. And actually, I'm sure this does me a whole lot more good in communicating with the people I work for.
You're probably right about
being
that.
On Meet the Press a few minutes on a Sunday morning.
All right, we'll see you again soon.
See you
Thanks
soon.
again.